So I did hit the record button, so we are official now, being on the record. My name is Heather Riggs. I'm with the New England Museum Association. I'm actually here in Somerville, Massachusetts, right outside of NEMA's headquarters in Arlington, Massachusetts. And I'm very familiar with Mount Auburn Cemetery. It is definitely one of my favorite spots to go for walks. It is, if you don't know anything about Mount Auburn Cemetery, I would strongly encourage you to look them up. If you're in the neighborhood, check them out. It is an amazing place to go and see for multiple reasons. So I'm not going to talk more about Mount Auburn Cemetery and my love of Mount Auburn Cemetery. I'm going to let Jenny Gilbert do that instead. She's the director of institutional advancement or advancement? Advancement, okay. She is going to lead a discussion on artisan residence programs at Mount Auburn Cemetery. They've been doing this program for several years. They've produced quite a lot of interesting content, a lot of artwork, but I won't go into details on that one because that's Jenny's job. So today's session is being recorded, I should mention that, and it will be available on the NEMA website later on this afternoon. We also have closed captions available. If you click the CC button down at the bottom of your screen, those will pop up there. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panelist or Jenny, you could type them in the chat feature or the Q&A section, and I will be sharing that information with all of the panelists. So Jenny, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Heather, and welcome everybody. A big shout out to my colleagues at Mount Auburn who are attending this session. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm probably going to turn off my video because I've had some connectivity issues, so I apologize for that. So today I'm going to talk about Mount Auburn's Artists in Residence program, and I am just delighted to be joined by all of our artists in residence today: Roberto Mighty, Mary Bichner, Patrick Gabridge, and Jesse Aron Green. So what is an Artist in Residence program? Well, these days there are just so many different models of artist residencies. But traditionally, an artist residency program was site-based, and it was someplace where artists could go and live for a period of time and have space to work, to be creative, to do whatever they wanted in terms of artistic creation. But today there are so many different models. There are models where artists are non-residential. There are models where artists are required to participate in programming at a museum or site or donate artwork. But the real beauty of an artist in residence program is it gives an artist space to really do a deep dive into a subject, or just to have space to be creative. So how did Mount Auburn get to have an Artist in Residence program? So as many of you know, Mount Auburn is a historic site, but we are also an active cemetery. And that is really the core of what Mount Auburn does. So we've had a 501c3, the Friends of Mount Auburn, that presents public programming for 34 years now. And in the recent decade, we really started to look into creative placemaking. So to do programs that really spoke to the uniqueness of Mount Auburn as a place of mourning and burial. And so here are just some images. On the left, we have an image of Dances by Isadora. This is a dance troupe that does dances by Isadora Duncan, and they've done their series of morning dances. So really directly mission connected. And on the right, I have a couple pictures of A Glimpse Beyond. And A Glimpse Beyond was a program that actually both Roberto and Mary participated in, that was a unique kind of walk through the grounds where you came upon theater, dance, original music, and we did that for quite a few years too. We also partnered with the Underground Railway Theater in Cambridge and did a performance of Our Town on the Ground. So before we launched into an artist in residency program, we had quite a few years of experience of doing this type of creative placemaking. So the background of our artist in residence program is that the first residency that we had was grant supported. We were working on a large federal grant, and we wanted to have a film component of it. We knew Roberto's work from A Glimpse Beyond, and we worked with Roberto on the proposal. And the piece that we had in the proposal was really a work for hire piece. It was to film the preservation of a significant monument at Mount Auburn. But while Roberto was on the grounds filming this monument, and the experience that he had with A Glimpse Beyond led him to pitch a fantastic project to us that was really creative, and the success of Roberto Mighty's Earth.Sky project, which he'll talk to you about, led us to envision a long-running program at Mount Auburn. So we spent a long time, and I would actually say we are still defining the program, working with our colleagues on staff, our trustees, reaching out to other arts organizations, folks who had experiences with a lot of artists, like the Cambridge Arts Council. We reached out to the Gardner Museum that has a residency program, just to see what their experience with residency is how public art works, how you can enliven a site. And the considerations for us primarily were that Mount Auburn is an active cemetery. Doing a residency has a real commitment of staff time, and that was a consideration. And also costs were a consideration for us. So this is what we ended up with. This is our program design. So to find candidates for our residency, we decided not to do an open call. We felt like that would just be too difficult. So we worked with partners to outreach to artists. We also responded directly to inquiries from artists about the program. And once we responded to an inquiry from an artist, we would meet with them, and that would be a team of staff who were on our working group, sometimes trustees, really to talk to the artist, to get to know them, to see if they would be a good fit for us. We also convened a jury of staff, trustees, volunteers, and community partners. And this really helped us foster collaboration and innovation around the program. So what we landed on was a 2-year low residency. So not something where the artist is with us full time. And the first year, the reason we wanted to do 2 years are for a couple reasons. Mount Auburn is beautiful every time of year. It's completely different in the winter than it is in the spring and the fall. Different things are happening on the grounds. And we felt that it was really important that the artist be able to see the cemetery for a full year. And the other thing that I would say is Mount Auburn is a pretty complex place. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of different stories. There are a lot of, it's just complicated. So what we envisioned was year one for the artist to be planning what they might do for a major project, to get inspiration, to learn about the cemetery, to interact with our staff, to participate in some public programming, and then really importantly, to give us time to fundraise. As many of you who work in museums know, you write a grant in September of one year, you get it in December, and then you do your project the next year. So we really needed that kind of buffer of time to be able to fundraise. The year two sees the completion of the final project that includes more programming and events. So how are we funding our Artisan Residence program? Well, we decided to make the artist stipend part of our budget instead of fundraise for that, because we just felt it was too risky to have to rely completely on fundraising. But we do a lot of fundraising around the Artist in Residence program. One great story is, you know, we've been able to engage new funders, do things that we had never done, like sponsorships. This is a photo from Patrick's play, Namesakes. And one of the great stories for fundraising for Patrick's plays was that there's a foundation that supports local theater that was established by a well-known theater guy named Bob Jolly, who actually happens to be buried at Mount Auburn. He died young, and he established a trust for local artists, and then we were able to approach them, and it was just such a great experience, I think, for Bob's loved ones to be able to support this project, to be able to see it come to life. You know, they said Bob would have been the first in line to audition for the plays. So we were really able to make new connections with funders that we wouldn't have had in the past. And we have some earned revenue that we've been able to achieve around the project for Patrick's plays. We had tickets, and also for Mary's performances, we had tickets. So what is the organizational impact that Mount Auburn's Artist in Residence program has had? It's given us a really unique programming that is defined by our site. Each artist and each medium attracts different audiences. So we've had new, more diverse audiences, new members. We had several people, for Patrick's plays last year, we had a discounted member price, so people joined as members. We have institutional funders, and I would say we've even actually had some people buy lot space as a result of experiencing the Artist in Residence programs. We've had stronger relationships with community partners that our Artists in Residence have established, and we've also had stronger relationships, I would say specifically with Patrick and Roberto, around some of the lot owners and some of the stories of people buried at Mount Auburn. We've had, you know, very importantly, long-lasting relationships with the artists. If it were not for COVID, Mary would have done a concert in Bigelow Chapel this fall, and we would have done a presentation of another play by Pat this fall. So, and we've had a long-going relationship with Roberto as well. So it's just been fantastic for us. And finally, we've gotten great press. People who never would have covered us, like the Theater Geek or Music Rags. You know, I think that most of the artists have had a feature in Cemetery and Cremation magazine. So it's just been really fantastic. The press that we've gotten and the interest in the program. So that's the program from kind of our organizational standpoint. And now I'm going to pass it on to the artists.
So shall I just begin speaking then? Is that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm really honored, and it's great to be here with the other artists who are all, you know, amazing artists, and it's just a pleasure and an honor. So my own experience was wonderful. This began, my story begins a couple of years before this, when I did 2 projects at Harvard, one at the Arnold Arboretum entirely about trees, and the other one at Harvard Forest about landscape land use in the 17th century between Puritans and Native Americans. So what does that have to do with cemeteries? Well, interestingly enough, people who had seen those shows of mine felt that there might in fact be, they recommended that I get in contact with Mount Auburn about filming A Glimpse Beyond, which was a performative, processional, amazing celebration. I said, yeah, sure, great, you know. I actually like cemeteries. And I fell in love with Mount Auburn, as so many people do who go there. And I really felt, I just had an amazing experience working on that project. And then, as you heard, I was asked about documenting a conservation project. And from there, I started actually looking at the names on the tombstones and on the monuments. And it became clear to me that many of the names on the tombstones or graves at Mount Auburn were in fact the same names, the same surnames as the Puritans I had been studying for the second Harvard project. And that really struck me like a bolt of lightning. I saw this continuum between the 17th century and the 19th century. So anyway, away we go. So the rest is history as far as this project is concerned. And I worked on it for a couple of years, then even a year afterward, pulling together an online exhibit, an exhibit that exists entirely online at earth.sky.com, that a person can just go on and sort of do self-guided, sort of browse around to the 29 separate short films that I made about Mount Auburn, as well as a extensive gallery of photographs. So as Jenny mentioned, a lot of press came about as a result of that. And I also just was able to sort of take time and think about other projects. During that time period, I worked on a number of other things. And it soon came to my attention that a project of mine that had to do with doing online exhibits, or museum-style online exhibits, might be of interest to some other people. So to make a really long story short, what's happening now in my career is that I am producing 2 television series for public television nationwide that will begin in the spring. This past year, back in August, GBH aired a half-hour documentary film that I created about Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King meeting in Boston in the 1950s. One of my TV series is about cemeteries around the world. As much as I love Boston, I was supposed to be traveling right now around the world personally, filming at cemeteries, but we did some shooting last year, and this year I am now spending most of my days and nights coordinating shoots in London, Paris, Argentina, Savannah, Georgia, New Orleans, Japan, and all that sort of thing, getting ready for the premiere of this new series in the fall. So this project specifically, obviously, is related to that particular television series that I'm doing now for public television. And then I think, generally speaking, the idea of taking time to just sort of be at a place, in particular this place, Mount Auburn, and let the project marinate, through your brain for a year or two, that is irreplaceable in the life of an artist, in my opinion. And that time that I was able to take, for the first time in many, many years in my own career, by the way, it helped that I lived not too far. I live in the Seaport, Fort Point Channel area of Boston. So it's really easy for me to drive out to Mount Auburn. And I would go to Mount Auburn day and night working on this particular artist in residence project. And just sit there, sometimes just looking at the stars, sometimes looking at the monuments, sometimes looking at the ground, and just let my mind wander. And the fact that that was supported by this program was absolutely invaluable to my career as an artist. I had just tremendous support from Ginny and her team. Before that, Meg and Bree and their teams at Mount Auburn, Jen Johnston, Jessica Bussman, and again, all the wonderful people there at Mount Auburn who were relentlessly positive, and really made it a point not to tell me what to do, which also is really critical. And I see some nods going on with the other artists. That is absolutely important to the artistic process. Prior to this, my career had been bifurcated between doing things I did for a living and doing things I did for fun. And during this period of this particular artist residency, I was able to see myself for a couple of years merging those two parts of my life. And again, letting my mind wander. I've had a variety of other artist residencies at Truro Center for the Arts down on the Cape, at Tree Frog Farm in Vermont with a film residency, and Santa Fe with another film workshop. But this was unique in that typically those other residencies were brief, right? They were a week, 2 weeks. Being able to keep going back to the same site again and again was, I can't stress enough. It seems like I'm just repeating myself. It was pivotal in allowing whatever artistic capabilities I had, to blossom and flower, and for me to see the possibilities and all the connections. I'm pleased to say, by the way, that literally this morning, by the way, in England right now, it's whatever, the days are way off. So I get my messages from England like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So, and this morning I was on email with one of London's foremost landscape architects, talking about kind of where I started. Just what role does this large green space, a particular cemetery in London called Highgate Cemetery, what role does that play in the biodiversity of a large urban hardscape like London? And again, there's that continuum from my work with Arnold Arboretum, my work at Harvard Forest, my work at Mount Auburn, to exactly what I'm doing now. And I just think that is incredibly powerful. I can't thank the people at Mount Auburn enough for believing in me. And I myself grew substantially as an artist, again, through that period of being able to just contemplate. So that's about what I have to say. Any questions, Jenny, or anything you'd like me to clarify?
We'll go to the next one now.
Great.
If my slideshow will advance. There we go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Bichner, and I am an orchestral composer with the musical, what I like to call superpowers of perfect pitch and synesthesia. So if you play a note, I can tell you what it is by name just by hearing it. And the reason that's so is because each time I hear a specific note, I see a specific color associated with it. So E is blue, G is green. And it makes lots of fun to write music. I like to write music kind of with visual things in mind. I love doing site-specific pieces or pieces inspired by landscapes or photographs or paintings. And I was a huge fan of Mount Auburn. I visited quite a bit and really loved it there, and even had the opportunity to perform there with Rob Villella, who is a literary historian that portrays Edgar Allan Poe. So many years ago, I got to perform with him, playing some of my Edgar Allan Poe inspired works. And so a couple years on, I heard about the wonderful Artisan Residence program that Mount Auburn had started, and Roberto's amazing work and his beautiful pieces. And so I contacted Mount Auburn to see if they might be interested in an additional Artisan Residence in the future. And they were very kind and very receptive and brought me in, and we discussed the possibilities. Initially, I had just suggested that I would compose some new music for the cemetery and perhaps it would be performed in concert down the line. But at the time, Mount Auburn was creating a new app, like a phone app, and wanted additional content for it. So they asked if I would be interested in recording the pieces that I was composing to use in their app and create sort of a walking tour. So as a composer, I mean, that's a dream come true. What an exciting opportunity. So absolutely, of course, I said yes. And was very excited to get to work with them. I also want to mention that I was pretty new to writing proposals at the time and, these sorts of kind of institutional programs, and Mount Auburn was so kind in helping me in that way. I gave them an initial proposal and they actually asked me to expand it and help me in that process and gave me some advice and suggestions for expanding it. So that was a really great experience and I learned a lot, and I feel like I'm able to apply that in my my current and future dealings as well. So the first year, I kind of wandered the cemetery at different times of day and different times of year, and I was looking for the color combinations of some of the chords that I love. So in the photo on the screen there, where there's kind of notes attached to the stained glass windows of a church, the color combinations of my chords are usually 3 colors at a time, and sometimes they're hard to find all together in nature, like orange, green, and purple, or yellow, green, and blue. So sometimes I really had to look, but it was very exciting. I was able to find these color combinations, and different times of year, different times of day, they would appear. Sometimes the sky was the right color, at 5 o'clock, but not at 3 o'clock, and things like that. So that was very exciting. And then, so the first year was writing, and then the second year was recording, and we got to record at WGBH Studios, which was fantastic. And I had a chamber orchestra of approximately 20 players, which was really wonderful, and a great conductor. So we all worked together to record these pieces, and then the pieces premiered in the spring and the fall. So I should say there were 2 suites, one for the spring, one for the fall, kind of like an homage to Vivaldi a little bit. And so we were able to perform those when the cemetery was featuring the colors that the pieces were inspired by. So that was also very exciting. And it was a great performance, series of performances. We got to perform in Mount Auburn's beautiful chapels, and had such a wonderful group of people come to join us. And it was really an excellent experience. And so, and also as a composer, I also had the opportunity of having orchestral pieces of mine recorded, so that I could, have those kind of in my portfolio and to share for future work, because recording for orchestra is very expensive. It needs a lot of people in a room at the same time working together. So I'm very grateful to Mount Auburn for that as well. And because of my work with Mount Auburn, I now am able to get more orchestral commissions, because I can kind of share what my orchestral music sounds like, and that's really incredible as well. And yes, I really had an excellent experience with Mount Auburn, and getting to meet all the incredible artists in residence. I love all of their work, and got to experience Roberto and Patrick's performances for Earth That Sky, and as well as Patrick's plays, and they were beautiful and so wonderful, and I was so happy to be there. And I look forward to attending Jesse's premieres as well later in his residency. So yeah, it was excellent experience. I highly recommend it, and I'm so grateful to Mount Auburn for making it possible. Thank you.
I'm Patrick Gabridge, now unmuted. And so I'm a playwright and producer, and I was so excited when Mount Auburn contacted me about the possibility for this. And they had heard about me because I was already producing site-specific work at some other sites around Boston. So my play Blood on the Snow and my play Cato and Dolly had both run at the Old State House in Boston pretty successfully. And this is something I was really working on pursuing more, and starting up a whole theater company that specialized in creating site-specific work. And so the timing worked out perfectly, and then I was just kind of getting going on that. But I had some really serious experience and some good teams behind me to make shows. And then, the opportunity to work at this place that's so rich in history and in the environment and nature was just super exciting. I mean, that was the difficult thing, I think, was that the bar had been set pretty high by Roberto and Mary. So I was able to listen to their work and watch Roberto's films online. I was like, wow, okay, I really need to step up my game here. And the nice thing is that, like both of them said, the support from the staff was really great. I spent a lot of time at the archives with Meg Winslow, and just a lot of time the first year walking around the cemetery, going on tours. They have 100 programs a year there, ranging from bird walks to nature events. We went mushroom hunting. Then there's historical tours, and the volunteers there are extremely knowledgeable. So there's just a lot of resources, but it's really difficult. There's 100,000 people buried there. So my job, was to try to figure out, make some plays about this place and the people buried there. And I'm grateful, as Roberta said, to have the time to think about it and really get deep into the place and try to understand it and talk to the people who work there, who know so much, to try to shape what I was going to do. In the end, my feeling was that, kind of inspired by the other 2 artists, that it was clear I didn't want to just write one piece, that it made sense to write lots of short pieces to kind of explore the richness of the place. So I actually did a 5-play series called the Nature Plays, which are, as you would guess, about nature at the cemetery, but covered a lot of different aspects of it. And the audience would go from site to site to site, each of these 5 plays. And the spring program was just a little more than an hour. And we would lead them throughout the cemetery, through each different play, and then have a guided discussion afterwards. And it's a very intimate experience, as a lot of the kind of work that I do tends to be. You can kind of see in the photograph down below with the bird watchers, like there's the audience right there. They're right next to the performers. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about making this kind of site-specific work, is that it's a different experience than when you're programming in a regular theater, and that it's much more engaged. The kind of invisible barrier between performers and audience is greatly reduced. So it's a different kind of much more engaging experience. So that's something I think that the institution finds valuable when we're making this kind of play, because my goal in writing these kinds of plays is to give people a different relationship to the place than they had before, and to really deepen that by bringing it to life in different ways. And this series of plays covered everything from the strange mating habits of spotted salamanders to, things named after naturalists and whether they should be if they were historically racist, and all kinds of different issues we were exploring there. And it was great. We had a cast of 4 professional actors, and I also appreciated that Mount Auburn was really willing to commit resources to make sure that we were doing top-notch productions, so that, and I think you saw that with each of the other artists' work too, is that we were able to hire professionals to be in there and mount a full, it's equity actors, union actors production for the people that we brought in. And then we did another set of plays, the America plays, in the fall, that were kind of around American history and building of American identity through the lens of Mount Auburn Cemetery. And again, that was varied. Again, it had 5 short plays. The audience moved from spot to spot. When I'm making a site-specific play, I'm very much interested in not changing the environment. So we're not building sets, we're not doing it on a stage, we're staging things right where they are and trying to make sure there's always a tie-in to the place. Though we do use sound design for us, helps gives us a little bit of leeway into modifying the environment. But again, we wrote a play about Armenian refugees from the genocide in the 1920s, and that was involving a family whose family members are buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery. So we had great cooperation from them. And again, I was able to get experts in many different fields working with us. And I think that helped the institution too enlarge those relationships. And again, we were able to get great coverage from NPR and other things, because the work we were doing was really highly unusual, but also really enriching for what we were doing. So I loved working there. It's just a fantastic ability to try new things. Like at the end, we had one final play 11, because 10 wasn't enough. We had to do one more. And I originally was going to do a play that could only be done on a rainy day, but the production demands of that were too much in relation to everything else. So instead, I designed a play to be done under the full moon at Washington Tower. So it's Moonlight Abolitionists is the play that we're hoping to bring back again next year. It's a concert reading between 6 abolitionists who are buried at Mount Auburn Cemetery. And so I've appreciated the ability to keep working there, and looking forward to a long-term relationship. And it's continued to enrich my work beyond this institution. So my work is now, we have a commission from Campobello Roosevelt Park to do a play in the Roosevelt Cottage on Campobello Island, New Brunswick. That's done and ready to go if the pandemic wasn't slowing us down. And I'm working on some plays to be done at Old South Meeting House in downtown Boston. So that'll happen the next year or two, and a couple other possibilities. So, but I think this experience was particularly powerful. I mean, just to be able to do things that we could never pay to do inside. So like in the Armenian play, the characters, die at different points during the play, and they just kind of walk off the site. And at the shows in the evening late in the fall, they would just walk into the gloom of the dusk. And it was an incredibly powerful experience, I think, for me as an artist, and I think the audience felt that way too. So yeah, I'm very grateful to have gotten to do it, and I hope more institutions try stuff like this. So that's it for me.
This is Heather. I should mention, Patrick, that Cato and Dolly was featured at our conference last year in Burlington, Vermont. So we had a slight performance and also a session on top of that. So you were actually featured at our conference last year.
Yeah, it was great. And actually that performance led to the project at Campobello.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yep, directly.
Okay, Jesse.
Hi everyone, I'm Jesse Aron Green. Thanks for having me, NEMA and Jenny, and it's wonderful to be fourth in this row of incredible artists. It's wonderful to hear about your stuff. So I'm a visual artist. I was born in Boston, grew up here, went to college here, and then left. And I make project-based work. So I'll often research a subject very in depth over many years and produce dozens, sometimes hundreds of individual artistic objects related to that topic. The topic is often historical too. So before I came into contact with Mount Auburn recently, I was working on a project called Shake or Pop, which is deeply concerned with the history of American aesthetics as they have regional differences, looking at American aesthetics by way of the slight differences among regional craft forms. So, for instance, I began to make a large series of paintings based on, that are photorealistic, based on different colors and patterns of seat weavings in chairs in the 18th and 19th century in New England and other regions. And that led me to other kinds of series of works. So that led to a number of paintings that looked similarly at the differences in rock wall construction and type in different areas of the country. And the aim of this project is really to look at this history, but also to understand something about the diversity of approaches to craft and form across it, really looking quite carefully at the very small differences that speak very largely about the diversity of approaches to making art and making lives. Another grouping of works for that project, for the Shake or Pop project, is a series of sculptures that I'm making, which are based on cemeteries all over the country. So I'm making miniature sculptural forms that embed the headstones into the landscape. So carving out of marble landscapes and headstones as one object. And I should say that this project, the Shake or Pop project, is still ongoing. For this last grouping of works, for these cemetery sculptures, I contacted Mount Auburn so that I could come and photograph the site and use a portion of the cemetery sort of as my first foray, as my first attempt to make these sculptures. And I picked Mount Auburn not only because it's only 1.5 miles down the road, but also because I have a long-standing personal relationship to the cemetery. I grew up coming. My mother brought me because she studied landscape design, and later my best friend's brother and father were both buried there. And I was particularly interested in making a sculpture of Harvard Hill, which is where Archie Epps, my best friend's father, is buried. And so I got in touch, and they graciously allowed me to come on site with some complicated 3D scanning equipment and to make some mock-up 3D models. And that's the image that you see in the lower right. That's a 3D scan of Harvard Hill. And that led Jenny and her team to begin discussions with me about the Artisan Residence Program, which I hadn't known existed beforehand. And it was really wonderful to immediately be taken into the process of becoming Artisan Residence by means of very deliberate, careful, and patient conversations. As an artist, I've done residencies all over the world, had shows and commissions all over the world, and it is rare that I have been treated with as much care by the curatorial staff, by the institutional staff, to make sure that my aims and their aims would be able to sing together, that we would be able to support each other in the best ways possible. And I have to say that from my first day talking to Jenny, I have felt like part of the family. And I think the other artists on this panel will probably agree with me. It's an incredibly special organization. And it makes perfect sense that it would function that way because the choices made here last here, right? The choices have to be made deliberately because they really will be around for a very long time. And that's not only special, it also sets a very high bar for us, I think. The expectations are really wonderfully high. And I know that for myself, it has led me to force myself to raise to those challenges, to sort of grow as an artist. And I imagine that the same might be true of the other panelists here. So it's an exciting moment right now for me in relationship to the production of my project. I'm coming up on something like the 10-month mark, right, within the first year. So the first year of research and reflection, which Mount Auburn so generously built into this residency, has been really wonderful, even if also challenged by COVID, right? For many months, I wasn't able to go to the archive. I wasn't able to go to the site. But then the staff made special dispensation to allow me to go when many to the site, at least, when many other people weren't able to. And that allowed me a kind of space for solitary reflection that actually I wouldn't have otherwise been afforded during normal times. And these considerations about access, about a private time within such a beautiful site during a period when many of us feel disconnected, right? These considerations are things that I'm finding myself returning to over and over as I develop this project, particularly in light of the thematics that I feel I have a responsibility at this historical moment to speak to. Right, the issues around who gets memorialized now, who doesn't, and whether memorials that seem to be permanent may not be. At this period when we see memorials being taken down all over the country, and other memorials that are not permanent, that are created by communities put up out of a real urgent need. I feel like my time at Mount Auburn, short though it's been so far, has been incredibly rich as it's allowed me to explore these issues. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest of the project through.
Well, thank you, everybody. I just have one final slide, and then Heather, we can do any questions that arise. And it's just some links, a link to our program, and then a link to each one of the artists' websites. So thank you so much. And I'm sure you all have questions for the artists. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now.
So this is the time, if you have any questions, to go ahead and type them into the chat feature or the Q&A. I want to thank all the artists that spoke today. It sounds like great projects. I really want to go onto the Mount Auburn website and to your websites to go and check them out a little bit more. Hopefully we can actually see things in person at some point in time.
I forgot to mention that we actually have an event tonight. That we have a book of the plays that came out. So we're actually having a book launch tonight. I'll put the link in the chat. So we never stop. We never stop here.
Always producing. That's always a good thing.
That's right.
That's cool. So Jenny, if anybody does have any questions, go ahead and type them in there. Can you talk a little bit more about the funding?
Absolutely. So we, as I mentioned, we established a stipend, and then we work to fundraise through funders who we know, through funders who the artists might know, who funders are specific to the medium of the artist. So for example, when we work with Patrick, I mentioned the Trust that supports theater. Also, when we worked with Patrick, we did a playbook with sponsorship opportunities. That was something that we wouldn't have done. So we contacted caterers we worked with and community banks. So it gave us some more reach for the funding.
So my colleague Scarlett, is there a favorite spot in Mount Auburn that inspires you the most? You have to pick one though, only one.
That's a tough one. I have like 11, but we'll just say the Sphinx. The Sphinx has a real power over me, I have to say, and the inscription on it is particularly powerful.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me too. Someone else go ahead. There's so many, and the truth is that I've really spent. I began working on A Glimpse Beyond in 2012. It is now 2020. We finished filming for one of the episodes of my PBS series 3 weeks ago. So you could say that for 8 years, I've been going to and from Mount Auburn Cemetery. So someone else go. I'll think. I'll keep thinking.
It's also changed since you started that with all the trees and the different landscaping going in at the very beginning of the entrance right there. I mean, it's definitely changed quite a bit.
That's right. There have been changes all over the cemetery, and many. That's right. Which at first you don't imagine when you first walk in there, but in 8 years, a lot is different. Yeah.
Mary, do you have one?
It's hard to pick one, but I would have to say the inside of Bigelow Chapel is up there as one of my favorite places for a number of reasons. One, it is my favorite place to sing in the whole world. It has this beautiful echo. Also, the stained glass windows are gorgeous. I wrote one piece inspired by them. And if you get there at the right time of day, the colors from the stained glass window are scattered all over the floor, and the floor is illuminated. And it's only for a couple minutes, and that's also a very beautiful experience. I recommend it if you're there in the afternoon.
Well, I have a bit of a non-answer. I mean, I've been coming to Mount Auburn since I was probably at least 10 years old, right? And I've been many, many, many times, more times than I can count. And I pride myself on being able to find my way and get around. But I have to say, Mount Auburn is one of the places where I get most easily turned around.
Yeah.
And that actually is one of my most favorite things about it. I experience it all the time as kind of a series of moments. Every time I walk through, I feel like I'm being led along some different narrative path and allowed to see sort of a scene or a view or an angle that I'd never seen before. And that is by far my favorite thing about it.
So I agree with what you just said, Jesse. I get lost every time, by the way, after 8 years still. But I'd say the consecration dell is a particular part of the cemetery. It happens to be the oldest part of the cemetery, first consecrated in 1831. But it is a place of tremendous differences in grade, slope, and obviously elevation, with interesting trees. Once again, my obsession with trees. Interesting trees growing out, and a vernal pool, a vernal pond in the middle, in which there's all sorts of interesting wildlife, and very fascinating monuments that go up. It's like being in an amphitheater or a bowl. Hollywood Bowl, anyone? No. And yeah. And so I'm making this motion because you can be at the bottom, you can go in the sort of the terraced rings around it. It's a really fantastic place.
I suppose my other favorite place is one of the places where you're least likely to get lost, which is the top of the tower, right? Where you have a beautiful view of the entire city. It's hard to beat.
And Jesse, there was a question in the chat about have you done any work on iconography of monuments?
Well, the incredible gift of this residency in particular is the fact that it is an archive in so many different ways, right? Working with Meg in the actual archive, working among the monuments and learning from their archive of forms that they represent. And a lot of my job up to this point has been researching as many of these things as possible to figure out sort of which one will lead me to the project. And one area that I am working specifically is exactly what you asked about, sort of iconographies of forms, and whether that might lead me to sort of to specific kinds of sculptural choices if we do end up making sculptures for part of this project. Another research sort of interest that I've been pursuing with the help of an intern is related to that, but very different, which is how have all of the other contemporary artists in this country and around the world met the challenge of making monuments now, of making memorials now. So I'm specifically right now trying to assemble as many examples of these as possible, so as to not only be informed about the history of iconography within gravestones, over the centuries and monuments, but also more current contemporary examples, formal choices that my peers have made when trying to answer some of these same questions. So that's something we're assembling right now and that we're hoping to share in some way separate from the project itself.
It's a big topic.
Yeah.
Very current. So there is a question coming in of someone that lives by Forest Hill Cemetery, another one of my favorites, and JP, and they have very limited access during the quarantine period. Are any of you able to incorporate and combine the pandemic solitude of this time into the vibe of cemeteries in general? That's a deep one.
Yeah. I'd have to say that, as it happens, I'm working on a cemetery project anyway right now. But yes, being alone, or for the most part, sort of stuck in my studio, my home, it really lends itself to, again, deep thinking, less input from the outside world. I think we are, I feel deluged with input, and it's great to have some, unfortunately it's a pandemic, right? But it's great to have some way of cutting off some of that input so I can just, focus in my own thinking. So I'd say that's been absolutely useful, for me to spend a whole lot of time, once again, a whole lot of time contemplating these things that I'm working on.
Yeah, I think I'm sadly disappointed that we weren't able to do the Moonlight Abolitionist piece this fall, because I feel like it's a piece that really spoke to kind of our current political moment, as well as there's something about being in the cemetery at night when a lot of the distractions of sights and sound go away and you're just kind of left with the place, which I think is very related to how we feel in the pandemic. Like, so much has been stripped away from us. And so, I think that feeling will come with us when we're able to mount it again in the spring.
I know for myself, when we started working, I was thinking very much about how this is site specific, right? How the landscape and the particular conditions of the cemetery can really lead to the production of specific choices. But then as soon as the pandemic hit, it became clear that it was not only site specific, it was temporally specific. It was historically specific, right? And suddenly I began to ask very, very different kinds of questions, especially because the site wasn't accessible to everyone. Questions like, what service might I provide as an artist and might the cemetery provide during this time when most people aren't able to visit? Is there something special and specific that I can do if I personally and individually have access that can be of service to all of the people who aren't able to visit? Now, that's changed, right? That people are able to visit now. And so some of the solutions that I was being led to are no longer as relevant as they were, but it was really interesting to be able to ask those questions and to be led to different kinds of creative choices. It led me to think about, okay, well, what might it mean to produce video content, sort of like this Zoom feed, for people all over the world based on the cemetery, right? Would I want to give some kind of walking tour? Would I want to create some kind of audio work? And again, those choices are not where the project is now, but it was wonderful to have the pandemic lead to those kind of productive questions.
For me, so I'm not working at the cemetery at the moment, but I'm doing a few things at home. The majority of my job is composing, so I tend to be home most of the time. So I'd say that hasn't changed too much. But one thing as a musician is that performances, such as the performance I was going to do at Mount Auburn this year, have all been canceled. And for music, kind of being together and being with people is a big component of it, at least for me. So I do miss that. As Jesse said, there are opportunities to do things over Zoom as well, but I've learned that, like, think I like being with people. When I stare at a camera, it's really interesting. I like get nervous, and because I don't kind of see anyone and I can't interact with you and kind of be in the room with you. So I find that a little harder. So I'll say I'm looking forward to being able to perform again in a few years. But until then, I'll be at home writing music, so I'll have lots of new stuff to share with you.
I don't know. I kind of feel like we're all in, we can make a circle of the square or whatever that old game show was. You're just within arm's reach, right?
Can I pick up on something you said, Jesse? In fact, my very favorite time to be at the cemetery is in the winter, in the dark, during a blizzard, because there's really no one else there. Like no one comes, and it is so special to be there. Yeah, alone. To know that you're the only living person there is such a privilege, and it immediately gets me being, just whatever creativity I have, it just comes blossoming right up,
Jenny, did you see the question don't mean to change subject. There was a question in the chat about any other artist in residence programs or models that were used for this.
Yeah, so I put my email in there, jgilbert@mountauburn.org. Ken or anyone else, please feel free to contact me directly. We did look at a lot of different models. We talked to folks at the Gardner Museum. We talked a lot with people at the National Park Service. They have a big residency program with the sites all over the country who have different models. So we worked with them very closely. We also talked a lot with just people who commission art, like the Cambridge Arts Council and their public art program. So we really had kind of a hybrid of reaching out to some local people, some national people. And then there's the, I think it's the American, there's an organization that deals specifically with artist residencies. And I think the American Alliance of Artist Residencies, but just looking at their website and seeing all the different models was also super helpful. But please contact me, anyone individually, because it was really, our model is unique to us. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what would work for Mount Auburn.
Can I pipe in here too, if I may? I was talking a little bit earlier about how special the relationship has been working with Mount Auburn as an artist, but I want to emphasize that specialness not only has to do with how wonderful the staff is and how unique the institution is, but also because of these specific choices about how to organize this residency. I mean, I've been commissioned to do many projects. I've done many different kinds of artist in residence programs, some very long. I spent a year in Japan without a specific project to complete, although I did complete one. I spent 3 months in Poland with a very, very specific project to complete that was then invited back to the museum, and many other models. And I have to say that the most distinctive feature of working at Mount Auburn for me so far has been that even though I am creating a new work, I do not feel like I'm a content producer, right? I feel like I'm a member of the team. I feel like I'm a member of the family. I feel like I've been invited to really contribute something that, regardless of how physically sort of ever present it might be, will become part of this institutional history. And that is extremely special because it implies a real bond and a real relationship. That's what's distinctive for me about this and makes it very different than some of the other programs that I've been a part of. And I have to say those other models, the more common models, are the ones where artists probably are treated as content producers and the relationship doesn't last as long. So.
So we do have one final question that came in through the Q&A. It is the 1 o'clock hour, so we'll be fast. Could you please speak to the length of time the artists are in residence? I'm curious about this as I'm working on a residency at a historic site with much shorter time frames. How does the time frame impact the outcomes and community overlap?
So I can talk to that. The reason we designed it for 2 years was one, the seasonality, wanting the artists to be able to experience our site in all seasons, the complexity of Mount Auburn, all the different kind of paths an artist could take to creativity. And also fundraising, the fact that, you know, we really need to kind of get behind a project to be articulate it, to have a budget. And as many of you museum people know, fundraising can take, you know, 1 or 2 years from project conception to project completion. So we wanted to give ourselves the space to be able to do that. And that's why we designed the 2-year. And also just to give the artists a space, because we don't have a resident, so we aren't able to house somebody for 3 months or however much time and give them that intense space. So we thought a low residency where they have the opportunity to come as much or as little as they want. And also it gives us enough time for them to engage with our public over a couple years. For example, in year 1, Mary did these great pop-up concerts while she was composing her music, and we did some stage readings with Patrick. We did a preview of kind of work in progress with Roberto Mighty. So it gives us an opportunity also to promote the artist and to have language around the programs that they're doing.
Yeah, I think institutionally, people need to think that this is more than just kind of like Jesse said. It's not just content creation, but it's institution building too. So like we're all of us in touch a lot with the board and donors, and so you know institutionally, there's a lot of other things you're able to get out of these residencies when you're picking the right people. That people who understand the institution, that buy into it, so that you can enlarge some of the community response that you have.
And the reason someone like us might be so eager to buy in is not only because we have an investment that pre-exists with the institution, as I do, but also because we recognize that there's something special that's afforded by the longer length of time. If I'm invited onto a residency that is short in its time frame, I'm going to do something I already know how to do, right? I'm going to bring my practice as it is established. With a longer period of time, I'm able to really grow as an artist. Or potentially grow as an artist, really to take some risks and try to do something that's not only you know, challenging for the institution and for the public, but also for me, for us. So that's one of the great benefits from the point of view of the artist.
Well, that's great. We are at the 1 o'clock hour, so we should probably wrap up. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I would especially like to thank Mary, Patrick, Roberto, and Jesse for talking about the residencies. They sound great. Definitely check out Mount Auburn's website for more information about the residencies. And Jenny, thank you so much for moving your conference session into a lunch with NEMA. We do appreciate the opportunity to talk about this on person, not in person, but virtually. I do appreciate that one. And thanks everybody. And Jenny, do you have any final comments to wrap up?
No, it's just, thanks so much to the artists. You're all incredible. It's been a joy for us to work with you and to see how you interpret our site in ways that we couldn't even imagine. So thank you. And thank all the museum professionals for all the hard work that you do. I know it's been a tough year, but we're all in it together.
That's for sure. So I hope to see everybody at an upcoming NEMA Town Hall webinar networking or our annual conference in November. So make sure you check out the NEMA website for more information about that. And thanks everybody and have a great day.